Now, there's been a lot of talk lately about how Afghanistan has been the longest American war, but one aspect of this war seems to get lost in the shuffle, and that is the cost. America is facing a recession, and money is something that's on everyone's mind, except when it comes to Afghanistan. So with $1 million per soldier per year being spent, I think it's pretty safe to say that the cost of this war are unprecedented. So can we even afford to keep it going? Well, earlier I caught up with Derrick Crowe in Texas, the political director at Brave New Foundation. And I started out by asking him, by his calculations, how much the war in Afghanistan has actually cost us.
Well, since 2001, the U.S. Congress has approved about $300 billion on the war in Afghanistan. So that's really hitting Americans in their pocketbooks in a really difficult economic period.
Well, that's the thing is you're right, we're in a difficult economic period. We're in a recession right now. Our debt is through the roof, our deficit. So how can the U.S. even afford to keep this war going? I mean, we're 9 years in almost.
Well, we really can't afford it right now. I mean, defense spending is one of the least stimulative things you could do to generate economic activity. There was a study by a group called the Political Economy Research Institute back in 2007, and they estimated that for every $1 billion you spend on defense, you generate about 8,500 jobs. But if you compare that to something like mass transit, if you spend $1 billion there, you get almost 20,000 jobs. So you have to look at it in terms of what kind of economy we could have compared to the economy that we have because of this war. There's other kinds of trade-offs you can look at too. I mean, if you think about what you could do with almost $300 billion, that could have given almost 47,000 people who are low income, or 47 million, excuse me, people in the United States who are low income, and could have given them affordable health care for a year. That's an incredible opportunity cost.
Well, Derrick, you know, the economy that we have, the country that we have is addicted to military spending. I mean, it seems like it's something that's just out of control that really can't be stopped. So is there any way to break out of that addiction? Can we go to, military rehab?
Well, that's a good term, I think. We do need a kind of rehab. I mean, military spending does create a certain level of economic activity. It's a very low level compared to the other types of spending we could do. But what policymakers who are tight with the defense industry have managed to do is to spread those jobs around to enough congressional districts around the country that every congressional district, if they're not careful, and every congressman and congresswoman gets kind of hooked on defense spending as a way of providing quote-unquote jobs activity in their district. But the problem that we have is people don't compare that to the economy that we could have. And one of the most important things we could do, and this is going to sound like a statement of the obvious, but it's to stop viewing war as the answer to political problems like we do in Afghanistan.
Well, that's the thing. The problem that I have here is, you're right, a lot of Americans depend on many of these defense jobs, and they do all happen to be in these small congressional districts, and the constituents put pressure on their Congress members. But at the end of the day, most Americans don't even feel like their country is at war because it doesn't affect them personally. So how do you get Americans to realize how much money their government is spending on it if it's not coming directly out of their pocketbooks? How do you get them to care? How do you get them to tell the government to stop spending so much on defense?
Well, one of the things we're doing is on our Rethink Afghanistan project, we're focused on organizing online, especially on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/rethinkafghanistan. And we're really trying to drive home what those costs are, because those costs really are hitting us in the pocketbook, but they're disguised in a way that we don't see them directly. There are a lot of American families who are being affected directly, though, by the war in Afghanistan. We've just had recently the 1,000th U.S. troop death in the Afghanistan war. And so there are families around the country who are being directly affected, and we try to tell their stories when we can. There are veterans who are affected. We have a solid contingent of veterans who are joining us on our Rethink Afghanistan campaign. And you've had a couple of them frequently on your show. Jake Diliberto, for example, is one of them. But what we're trying to hold up, especially since, I don't know if your viewers may not be aware of this, but the United States has recently spent our trillionth dollar on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, those costs are actually much higher, but you pay those out over time. The total cost will be more than $3 trillion. So what we've done is to do things like create a game where you can see the trade-offs for those $1 trillion. One of the smaller trade-offs, I mean, just to think about how we're spending our money in ways that aren't making us safer, is you realize that you could hire every worker in Afghanistan, every single person in the labor force there, for $12 billion a year. That's incredible when we're spending $300 billion to fight a war there that's based on an insurgency that's motivated largely by our presence. There are many other ways we could be spending this money that actually make us safer, and that's what we keep trying to drive home to people by showing the trade-offs and showing how the war is actually not making us safer.
All right, now, Derrick, we're running out of time, but I have a very quick question for you. First of all, after all the money that's been spent, what's it all for? You know, what do the people really get? Sure, you can say safety, but at the end of the day, we didn't get the oil in Iraq. We probably won't get any of that $1 trillion worth of mineral reserves that's in Afghanistan. And will this eventually lead to the collapse of the U.S.? Because many people compare this to the Soviet Union, which, you know, poured money and resources for 10 years into Afghanistan and then did collapse.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you could say that it would cause the collapse of the United States the same way it caused the collapse of the Soviet Union. But the very sad answer to your original question there, what are we getting for it? Unfortunately, the answer is we're getting decreased security. There's been excellent studies, especially by a guy named Robert Pape, who's done very well researched and very well sourced analysis of what motivates suicide terror campaigns. And in almost all of those cases, those campaigns are motivated by foreign occupation of key pieces of land. So the longer we're in Afghanistan, what we're actually getting for the money is decreased security, and that's got to change.
So we're losing out at the end, it looks like. All right, Derrick, thank you so much for joining me.
No problem. Thank you.